The question that's come in, I think, is quite interesting, sort of linked to what you're saying, is what do you think, and this is open to the panel, what do you think are the innovative applications of this discussion that we're having here within a context such as sub-Saharan Africa, where most children do not go to secondary school? What does lifelong learning mean for them? Would you like to pick up on that?
Well, let's talk about access. Yesterday I was in a panel which I was very happy to be in, because people were very critical of this continued emphasis on access. Access to school, access to the computer, access to... We get happy when we talk about access, and governments get happy, and UNESCO gets happy with statistics that tell us about access. Well, access can mean very little unless there's quality involved. I disagree with politicians and technocrats who have been saying for ages in my region very clearly that quality is something that comes next. First it's access, because you need to the school or the computer now, and then the quality will come. I disagree with that. Either you provide the right to education is not the right to go to school. Today it's the right to learn throughout life. And if it's the right to go to school, it's the right to go to a good school. So these statistics of how many children don't go to school and how many don't complete primary education or secondary education, I tend to give them less value than many other people do. To me, what is important is, do they learn? What do they learn? And is what they learn, is it useful? That's what matters. We don't know. In our statistics, in our grandiose global, national, regional reports, we never know about that. And today, if we know something about learning, is called learning achievement. It's through tests. That's all we know about what our children don't know, because these tests are telling us what they don't know. I wish we could develop another kind of measurement, if it's necessary at all, where we know what do they know? What are they able of doing? I don't know what children in my country, in Ecuador, are able to do. However, I see children every day and I see they do wonderful things. They take care of their siblings, they know how to cook, they cross the streets without the assistance of an adult. They are able to go and purchase things on the shop nearby. And these are 4 or 5-year-old kids. Kids that probably will never go to school, but they know a lot of things that if the PISA test would be done according to these skills, which are survival skills, family skills, I wonder who would do best. Would our children in Ecuador, in Peru, in Bolivia, would do much better probably than Finnish and Danish children. So I always reject this idea that there are 21st century skills for everyone, that they are universal. I feel like adding a lot to that usual list, because survival is already a skill in today's world. And it's more and more so because we have the so-called natural disasters, which have a very important social component. So that much about learning.
Well, Francois, did you want to dig in there before we open it up to the audience for a few minutes?
So, I mean, you ask what are the implications for sub-Saharan Africa? Okay, I'll just give a couple examples. One that is already there, and another one that I hope will be there soon. Both come from India. Okay. Interestingly, so I think you talked about south-north and north-south. I think south-south is very important. And so in India, there is a guy that wanted to bring education to the rural villages, in places where there is no school. Okay, and they were. So he says, no, we have cell phones, and cell phones are being used by people that are illiterate. So talking about lifelong learning, and he wanted to help these people have relevant knowledge for their lives. Okay, and so one of the main problems that he was trying to tackle, and that all India is trying to tackle, and all of Africa, is HIV infection. Okay, so the best treatment is not treatment; it's prevention. So he decided to create a game to have people learn about how to prevent HIV. Okay? This game has been downloaded by 50 million people in India and in Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay? It's been translated in many different languages. They've adapted to the local cultures. Okay? So that's clearly something which is directly relevant for adults, okay? And of course for young ones as well. But I mean, this is really interesting, okay? And there is another experiment that comes from India where they put some computers in the walls, in the village or in the slums, and they made it accessible for the kids to learn. And that also has already been imported in Africa because it's fantastic, the amount that can be learned once you have access to knowledge. And then you learn by yourself, having access to knowledge. And in fact, it's not completely by yourself, it's by yourselves, in the sense that it's community of children that are learning together, okay? And they're also learning about how to share information, how to share the knowledge of building knowledge together, which is an essential skill. Then another example from India, Indian farmer, maybe you know the Khan Academy. Okay, the Khan Academy is a website to learn mathematics that is a very interesting innovation coming from the US. Okay? Even more interesting is this innovation coming from India because it's not one guy, Khan, giving knowledge to the others. It's Indian farmers telling about the knowledge they've acquired about the best practice locally, and then making it available to all of the fellow villagers anywhere, anytime. Okay? And so, the same thing can be applied to any society. Okay? You just need a web interface and an access with a cell phone for these sorts of things.
I like that sort of learning in the community type thing. I think that's sort of community action as opposed to having something imposed on a community. They're actually doing it themselves. And the Khan Academy is very much sort of old wine in new bottles. It's just old teaching via technology. It's just nonsense. I'd like. Okay, if it can be brief, because I want to just make sure that we give our audience and delegates a chance to come.
This case, which for me was very shocking, very interesting, very inspiring. I found in Botswana, I work a lot in Africa, I met in Botswana a group of people called the Basarwas. I don't know whether you have heard about them. They reject school. They don't want to send their children to school. And of course, from a government perspective and from people who are keen on having children in school, this is an absurd. I mean, the government wants to put schools there, and they don't want it. I went there. It was a 2-day journey. I wanted to ask them, why don't you want to send your children to school? Are you crazy, or what are you? Are you wise or what? They're wise. They don't want to send their children to school because the Basarwas are characterized as a cultural group that never punishes children. Dialogue is the main way of communicating with their children. They know from others, or they have seen, that this is not the school that they know. So why send their children to school? And, I think these people may be unschooled, but they're wise.
And they're probably not rioting. And they're probably not rioting. Sorry, that was a London joke for those that weren't in on that one. I'd like to now open this out to you. You've been very patient and watching our little dinner party in the front here, which I need you to be involved now. Before I open it broadly, I'm going to be a little bit elitist here. Is there anybody from the Learner's Voice group here that would like to ask a question? No? I'm asking only just because you don't have to, it's not obligatory, but yes, please, the lady just down here.
MIT, part of the Learner's Voice program. So touching on your last point, I guess when we talk about education, and specifically education for all, given that education's purpose, I guess, is cultural and societal advancement maybe, and given that different people have different cultural roles in different societies, is there one standard set of things people need to know? Or, I mean, is there something that, everyone should pass through? Is there a certain type of schooling that everyone needs to pass through, like certain standards, like we say?
That's a really good question, actually. What about accreditation for lifelong learning? How is it accredited? How do you, is it badging? How does it work?
I'm happy to speak to that one. I think it's really important that we're focusing a lot more strongly on how we learn, and that what we're accrediting is the ways that people engage and took control of learning and were able to represent their learning. The what, it becomes then the next point, and the what can change throughout your whole life and in lots of different contexts. Then how do we accredit that? I think that's why we don't emphasise it well, because it is hard to assess and to evaluate and to accredit. But because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it. I think the other thing with that is that if we're looking at the how, it means in certain contexts, how is related to context, absolutely. So in some situations you might be expert, and in some situations that same person is novice. So how do we talk about the skills that you bring to both of those situations to engage and to be able to make decisions and have a way to move forward in your life and the things that you want to do? So I think we need to have much better ways of understanding that. We've tried through many different ways to look at employability skills and those sorts of things to describe it. I just think we're just really rubbish at it, and that's been the real problem around accreditation.
Francois?
Lots of people would put reading, writing, and counting as part of these basic skills. I think that you have to be able to read what others have been producing. Okay, but that means reading, for instance, the signs of an animal in the forest. That can be very relevant. Okay, it could be, reading a TV interview of a politician and decoding all the wrong things that he's trying to sell you. Okay, and when you talk about writing, okay. We are not only talking about writing letters, we are talking about being able to produce content with any sort of technology, okay? And it could be painting, it's expressing yourself, and it's conveying something to someone else, okay? And it could be done by all sorts of technology that are as ancient or as modern as you want them to be, okay? And counting means having a scientific approach to the world. Okay? And a scientific approach to the world is something very general, especially in a digital age, because now you have everything is numbers today. Okay? So you have to be able to live in a world where everything is in numbers. So you have to understand what those numbers mean, how they are being built, and why are they relevant to you.
Thank you. The gentleman at the front, please. We're going to have a microphone down, and then we're going to take the gentleman behind after this one.
Good morning. They are Brown, panelists, and they are public. Okay, I have got a lot of key points from your speaker. Okay, I am Heiser Ledesma from Colombia. Okay, I have taken a lot of key points from your exposition, but I have chosen 3 key points. When you, Mrs. Wallace, talk about the lifelong learning, and when you talk about the African experience, and you talk about your Mr. Tadei, talk about the learning process. Okay, I want to say a short story from my own experience. Yes, 2 short. While working at the Universidad Sergio Arboleda in Colombia, working on the satellite, I learned that it's important, math, science, technology, but in some cases we forget the meaning of the process of learning. I was able to solve problems in that project about the sensor does not work with what we need to do. The time of the satellite is not correct. What's happening? But when I was in my house, it's crazy, but when I was in my house, my mother say me or ask me, hey sir, please, I need to adjust my spoon, for example, a tool for in the kitchen. I was I was confused and I didn't know what to do, what's happening, but I know maths. The question is that maybe I had unorganized knowledge for do anything, but not organized to do another things. The question is that knowledge is to solve something, yes? So what do you suggest? We had a lot of tools, scientific calculators, computers, USB memories. As much as memories we have, we memorize at least less things. So what do you suggest how to organize that all technologies and things and tools to solve real problems, not satellites and other things.
Okay, before
Thank
we
you
answer
so
the
much.
question, can we just take the question from the gentleman at the back and then we'll answer them both and then we'll have to close. Sorry about that. Thank you for the question. I think it's great that Colombia has a space program when the UK doesn't.
Thank you, and thank you to all of the panelists. My name is Kevin Lamb. I'm with Keystone Global Education, and maybe we should change the name to Keystone Learning instead. The question I have is for Francois, and it is in the last 5 to 10 years, we've learned so much about the brain and how the brain works, and we can now stick a kid in the MRI and watch him solve a calculus problem. Has that learning and those new insights about how the brain actually functions, where is that playing into how we're thinking about the learning process, and especially in lifelong learning?
Thank you. So we have a question about tools and organizing information from the gentleman at the front, and from the gentleman at the back we have a question about neuroscience. What are we learning from neuroscience in terms of lifelong learning, how it's occurring and how it's being affected? Who wants to go first? Now, we have to keep the answers very short because I'm getting asked off at the front.
Okay, let me start with the neuroscience. I'm a fan of neuroscience. I think it's bringing wonderful knowledge and insights into what we do as educators and as learners. I'm developing a concept which is a pro-age learning. Let's do, at every age has limits and potentials. This is what neuroscience is telling us. We have to do away with the idea that adults are learn it harder, it takes longer. It's not that simple. There are many things that you learn better when you're an adult that you cannot learn or learn in a more difficult way when you're a child. So every age has important potential. I think from neuroscience we can derive today lots of important knowledge in order to make a case for lifelong learning. The problem is, again, how do we make this knowledge available to everyone, to teachers, to educators, formal, non-formal? It's not there. It's not in the training of the teachers. It's not even sometimes in the mindsets of the policymakers and the technocrats who take the decisions. The second point I would like to make is one thing that has struck me in this conference. There's lots of talk about innovation and creativity. Two buzzwords. I never heard in any panel say what I'm going to say here. The poor are the most innovative people in the world. The poor are the most creative people in the world because you cannot overcome the problems of poverty and survive unless you are creative and highly innovative. They are born problem solvers. So what are we doing with that potential? It's there, and we simply ignore it. And in conferences like this, in many others, we think innovation is something that is in the future, and it's in the mindsets of some highly, extremely qualified people. Why don't we go out and see the innovation, creativity that is already there? And why don't we change our school systems so that the poor can develop those capacities instead of inhibiting them, which is what we usually do in the school system.
Good point, Rosa.
So I love what you just said, and I'll come back to it. To come back to go to your neuroscience question, one of the interesting developments is they've been trying to understand why can we read, and why can we count? Because those were not selected before. So they were looking the parts of our brains that are lighting up during that process. And by being able to follow the whole process happening in the brain, they've developed games that allow kids to learn to read or to count better. Okay, so that's one already interesting point. There is another point that I think is very relevant for lifelong learning, which is that they found out that one of the things that has to be used is inhibition zone in your brain, right here, okay? Because you should not use necessarily the first solution that comes to your mind. You have to inhibit that first intuitive solution, and sometimes you have to think deeper. Okay, and that's a very important skill. So very often you have to unlearn. Okay, so you have to be able to activate this part. Okay, so that's one point. To come to the technology, and we'll go instantly to the poor. To come to the technology, and you have to, and making things relevant. Okay, there is a big movement throughout the world that is called DIY, do it yourself. Okay, which I prefer to call do it ourselves. Okay, personally, because it's a community, okay, that is inventing things and putting them on the web and sharing whatever they've just invented, and they are making everything open source, not only software, but also hardware and wetware and all sorts of means of organizing things. And so everyone can contribute to these things, and they can solve whatever local problem they have at their hands. Okay, and those technology, the price gets done every year. Okay, so the same way you have, all of you have cell phone. I mean, it's even cheaper to build your own robot today. Okay, and then the robot is going to solve a problem that is your problem. Okay, and you can decide. Okay, and today you can already print 3D objects that are, the piece that you need to, repair your machine or do something that is relevant for you, okay? And those things, again, are getting cheaper and cheaper exponentially, okay? So tomorrow we'll have the means, not only the information, but also the infrastructure to be able to produce the technology that is locally relevant. And that's, to come back to the creativity question about the poor. Clearly they are the most creative, but they are not empowered by technology yet. Okay? And they are not able to share on a global scale their innovations. Okay? But if you allow them to connect, okay, that's why technology, why science works. It's not because there is a single genius somewhere. It's because there is a network, a community of people working together. So if you allow these poor people to connect to these technology communities, then they will be inventing amazing technology, solving the problems that they face in their daily life.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up the panel now. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to come and listen and take part in this debate. And I'd like you to show your appreciation, please, for our fabulous panelists. Thank you very much.